Thanks for having me here. I am from Microsoft. I've actually been at Microsoft the past three years. Before that, I worked in game development. I started doing game development when I was 12, and I've been um, building game engines. I built game engines up until I encountered Unity, at which point I switched more specifically to tools for game development. Um, and I spent some time in the industry. I worked on a lot of independent games and social mobile stuff. Then I spent some time in Zynga's VR department. This was kind of like around the time that the Vive started up. And I got into that. I was a rapid prototyper there. I did a lot of really fun experiments and stuff with VR. This is kind of where I got my start into mixed reality. Very exciting. I've loved it a lot since then. This is the tools though are kind of what I've always come back to. Like because I have such a big history with making game engines. Before Unity, you basically had to do everything from scratch, and so I did everything from scratch, and I was very good at that. And so when I got into Unity, I kind of continued doing a lot of the hard stuff, kind of these tools for like level design, content creation, um, visual effects, whatever. And I was really good at that. It's something that I ended up loving a lot. I sold some tools on the asset store, and this was kind of like a drug for me. I really, really liked it. And so when I came to Microsoft, I actually kind of continued doing that. I actually, my role at Microsoft is a little bit weird. Like I'm part of the Mixed Reality Academy, so I'm pseudo evangelist. I do a bunch of like presentations, events, hosting, but a lot of what I do is kind of like helping people make mixed reality applications. And so a lot of this work ends up being also kind of like tool development for people making mixed reality stuff. And especially since the pandemic has started and I haven't been able to do a lot of in-person events, I've spent a lot more time working on um, development tools, a lot more. So this was my first big tool at Microsoft was the mixed reality lighting tools. This was a plugin for Unity, basically kind of replicated the lighting of the world around you. A lot of cool stuff there. Um, but this talk is about StereoKit. StereoKit is a project that I began about 2 years ago now, I believe. And it was kind of born out of like all the experience that I had leading up to this mixed reality stuff, all this like helping people out, trying to solve their problems within the tool sets that they had. And I basically found that, we do have tools and they're okay. They get the job done and they're well established, they're well maintained, but they don't really put mixed reality at the top of their list. Um, and so I kind of wanted to build something that would solve all the problems I had seen and that did put mixed reality at the top of the list. So this is a quick video of it in action. This is kind of the demo scenes that I usually test with and work with. So it's just kind of a collection of different interactions. But StereoKit is a code first mixed reality engine. It's either C# or C++. C# is kind of the primary route to do this. But it basically simplifies everything, makes it really, really easy to do all of the major actions. Like I remember, a long time ago being like, okay, I want eye tracking data. How do I get eye tracking data? I remember spending the whole day, I wrote a script and it was great. It was beautiful. You could just take the script and say like input.eyes and you would have array. And so that whole page of code, that whole day that I spent just getting an array that represented the eyes. And I gave this to everybody else, and they were like, "Oh my god, this is exactly what I always wanted." Why wasn't that in the tool to start with? And so this is kind of what I do with StereoKit. Like everything that's like, I just want access to the eyes. Like, let me get this right away. And StereoKit does that. It gives you the data. It gives you the stuff that you need. It gets out of your way and just makes things really simple. And this is driven by OpenXR on the back end. So this works pretty much everywhere. It works on Oculus, Quest, as well as desktop, Steam VR, Vario, Monato on Linux. It works on the HoloLens, the Windows mixed reality stuff. And so I've got this on 3 whole operating systems, Windows and Windows UWP, Android, and then Linux. And thank you so much. There were a couple of people in this community that helped me stand up the Linux, Nova, Moses, and Turtle in particular. So shout out to them. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I wasn't actually much of a Linux developer before this, kind of my first experiences here. But because this is based on OpenXR, it meant that I didn't have to worry about like writing all these different backends. It's basically what made this project possible. So StereoKit is built entirely on top of OpenXR to make things work. And this was kind of like the core inspiration. Like when OpenXR first came out, and one of the nice things is Microsoft actually shipped the first OpenXR runtime that I'm aware of. This was the 0.9 version. And when it came out, I wrote a tutorial for it because it's kind of in my range of interests. And I made this little demo right here. And this is 700 lines of code. It's completely self-contained. It's DirectX 11. It's OpenXR. I think it even does its own math. And so 700 lines of code. And I could build onto the HoloLens in like 5-10 seconds with this application. Like I could like completely build, deploy, run, and it would be going. It was amazing. And I was like, wow, I really wish the whole development experience was kind of like at this pace. Like I really, really loved this iteration time. And so that was kind of why I went the rest of the way and I built StereoKit on top of it. I just wanted more of that. Yes, please. Um, so the best way to explain the rest of StereoKit is to kind of go through some of the core concepts that I really identified. Like this is important to what StereoKit is. This is why it's different. This is why it's interesting. So the very first thing is that it is mixed reality focused. Like above all other things, this is built for making mixed reality applications. You can kind of do some flat screen stuff, but most of the flat screen experience is really just an emulation of mixed reality. So like all the user interface is kind of this 3-dimensional or pseudo 3-dimensional stuff that you can interact with your hands. It is also very much like a hands first sort of thing. This is maybe a bit of a contentious idea. I know I have come back and added some additional controller explicit stuff, but primarily the interaction paradigm for working with StereoKit is with articulated hands. And I think, is it this one? So this is kind of like what you get with hands. You have at any given point in time articulated hands. With a mouse, it gives you just like kind of like and it switches between a grip and a pinch sort of pose. Same thing with controllers. A grip and a pinch pose simulates these articulated fingers. It does full support for leap motion on a HoloLens. It'll do just great. If OpenXR provides the hand tracking extension, it'll use this as well. So at any given point, you can assume that you have functional hands, which is really, really nice. And I think this is kind of a long-term bet. Like I kind of expect mixed reality devices in the future to pretty much always have articulated hands, even if it may be a little bit early to kind of like rely on this assumption quite yet. I still think it's kind of important to be designing the engine around this concept in preparation for that. And then anytime that there's like a mixed reality feature, like it's something that brings the real world in, like I'm all over that. And full disclosure here, because I'm a Microsoft person, I develop a little bit more with the HoloLens. All the footage here is captured from a HoloLens rather than a Magic Leap. I kind of hope, or sorry, a North Star is. So I don't actually have a North Star. I hope that many of these things will work on a North Star. And if you find that like it doesn't and it should, please let me know, because I really think the North Star is a really amazing device. I really, really like open stuff. And so I want to make sure that StereoKit works really well on North Star and works for you to help you build applications with this. And this goes all the way to like if you have extensions or libraries or stuff that you need help getting into StereoKit, I'm happy to either do that or assist you with getting it into this because it's a good place to experiment with these things. It's a nice playground because it's open source, because it's relatively simple and straightforward. It should be a good place to do these things, and that's what I want it to be good at. But yeah, this is a couple of things that you can do with StereoKit, especially within the context of the HoloLens, like the QR code recognition or eye tracking or adding lighting on top of the real world, stuff like this. Um, Simplicity. So this is kind of a thing that really bugs me a lot about tech these days. Is a lot of things are just too complicated. I remember like when I first started writing graphics for StereoKit, I took a look at Vulkan and I spent a month working with Vulkan, and I think I managed to clear the screen color. Um, I was really proud of it, but at the same time, I also said, I'm never going to ship something if this is the rate that this works at. And so I ditched that. I went with OpenGL. But the thought is still there. Like this has to be really easy to do. Otherwise, you're going to spend way too much time focusing on the wrong problems. And I really wanted to make people able to create applications, not spin their wheels on some of the framework or the lower level things. So keeping it very simple. So here's an example of what I mean by that. And so within this code first framework, one line of code still does one thing. So like up here, we've got this is Hello World. This is the entire application. This is all you need to do to display a three-dimensional model on the screen and look around at it. So like you initialize it, you load a model, and then each step you draw the model. That's it. Pretty straightforward, really easy. And then when you get into user interface, the same sort of thing. Like begin a window, here's a button. If the button was clicked, do a thing, end the window. And I try to keep this throughout the whole API. Like, how do I make sure that you can do the most possible with the least amount of code? I try to make this as extensible as possible, but I do sometimes make a few trade-offs here and there to prioritize, like just making sure that you can get the things out and there. So working with StereoKit should be really fast and fun. Similarly, the interesting thing about doing this code first plus simplicity sort of thing is that a lot of the times the code kind of becomes complete in small chunks and shareable. So like this ruler here, this is the code for that ruler. You could take this code, copy and paste it into your project, and then you would have that ruler in your project. And so this is really interesting. Like I know with a lot of modern tools, the definition for what is a thing is kind of split up across a number of different places. You'll have some code here, you'll have some object hierarchy here, you'll have some inspector settings here. If you wanted to take it from one project to the next, like this is a chore. It's not something that's as simple as copy and paste. And so this code first concept does come with some pretty nice advantages from this idea of self-contained representation. And another part of simplicity is having good documentation. So I consider documentation to be a core piece of StereoKit. Like StereoKit is not complete without documentation. And so the test project that I use for development has comments embedded in it. Then I have another tool that basically scrapes through the entire project, pulls out these comments, runs little screenshot things. It actually executes the application, compiles it, and everything like that. And then it builds the documentation website. So all of the code that you see on the documentation website is proven to run because I ran it. The screenshots there are of that actual code, and the comments there are like inline. So I can maintain all of this as I'm developing it. It's much easier to keep up to date, and it's guaranteed to be correct to the extent that it runs, which is really, really wonderful. And I've tried to double down on this. I try to make it a good, well explained. I'll go into details. I'll list units and spaces and things like that. I even have a little link at the bottom that like you click it and it automatically creates a GitHub issue. So if you do spot something wrong with it, you can let me know, or even make a pull request against that particular piece of documentation in the repository. But for me, documentation is critical. Like it's an absolute core component of what StereoKit is. Kind of to go with this, I recently released version 0.3.1, and I did it was a big update, lots of cool stuff, new features, things like that. And I went and created a small application that went through and gave a little demo of each of these new major features. So you can go to the release notes GitHub repository, look at the code for the demo. You can download the executable, load it up, and play it, and check it out. Which is a cool thought. Like, this is the first time I've done it, and I think I'll probably try and continue doing this in the future. I think this is a nice way to not just test these features, but also illustrate how they're used or what they look like. And it's kind of a fun way to check out release notes anyhow. So if you want to see that, it's right there at that particular link. Um, Fun. I don't code because you know I'm very internally motivated. It has to be fun. If it's not fun, I will leave in a heartbeat. So StereoKit is very fun to use. Like, I do so many different experiments with StereoKit. It's just like my folders are littered with tiny little projects that are just like these one-off experimentation things or big experimentation things. Like this one over here in the top right is a CSG thing where I'm actually doing CSG stuff for mesh manipulation or like some experimentation with hand menus. I've got this like procedural open world thing I've been playing with. I'm currently doing like fluid simulation for erosion with it. It's kind of fun. But like StereoKit is a blast to use because of its simplicity, because of how fast it is to code things. Like I focus on making sure the API is exciting. And then this is also, it's not really focused on games. So one of the interesting things about the existing tools is that they all come from game development. And yeah, I guess I kind of do too. But the interesting thing is, if you step back from games and say, like, what would a mixed reality engine look like if it wasn't coming with this game development baggage, you can do things a little bit different. And so, like, one thing that I think really kind of illustrates this thought is I ship StereoKit with a built-in file picker. I mean, that's not really something that you'll see in a game engine, right? Like, game engines don't have a runtime file picker in them. If you want that, you gotta, add it in yourself, like on top of it. But StereoKit comes with built-in cross-platform mixed reality file picker. And it's cool. You just load up a file at runtime. Like, you don't have to compile these assets in advance or anything like that. It loads them at runtime. For me, having an asset pipeline that works at runtime is really important. I worked with a lot of customers where, they'll be like, I needed to load a model because everybody needs to load a model if you're not making a game, right? Like, that's the thing. And they would either pull some code off the internet or they would try to write it themselves. And for a lot of those people, they weren't really familiar with 3D or how rendering works or stuff like that. And I've debugged a lot of really bad 3D model loaders. They cause some big problems. So having this asset pipeline built in and accessible at runtime is really important to me. Trivial UI creation. I kind of mentioned this before with the simplicity thing, but user interface is really big and important, especially within mixed reality, because how do you make a mixed reality UI? So I have a couple of different things here. Ooh, I got a direct note. Okay, cool. Yeah. I'll look at these in more detail once I get to the end. But yeah. So um, the so the user interface comes in kind of like this panel format. Like I this is a fairly familiar way to approach it. It's easy to build. It's this immediate mode user interface sort of system. Um, but you can also combine some of the components into kind of like these object sort of stuff where you have like user interface elements mixed with interactive hotspots on top of three-dimensional objects. And I think this kind of idea is important too. The user interface stuff that StereoKit does, though, is kind of this semi-optional system that's built on top of StereoKit. So you could create the StereoKit user interface on top of StereoKit yourself. It's kind of meant to be like, we're still early in the user interface conceptualization within mixed reality. Like we don't necessarily know which direction it's going to go in. So I wanted to create a little bit of extra room to make sure that that was still something that, like, if you wanted to go in a completely different with that direction with user interface with StereoKit, you could totally do that. And like I'm really happy. I think that's worked at least to some extent. You've seen Nova's stuff. Like Nova still uses StereoKit's rendering underneath, but goes a completely different direction with the user interface. So that's perfect. It's great. So if you want this user interface stuff, it's there for you. You can build your application with it. But if you want to go a different direction, you're totally able to do that too. And just kind of like here's a kind of an example of a game that I was working on where I built a small level editor. And apologies, it's a little bit cropped here, but the idea was that I just wanted a simple user interface where I could build this kind of obstacle course sort of thing, where you just have like these slices of obstacles that you dodge around. And I built a full editor. This took me like a day or two to put together. It gave me like the whole collection, like light design, some of the obstacle stuff. It would let you run through the experience and play it. And so some of these were very traditional looking user interfaces where you can see that kind of panel design. And some of this was, kind of this slightly different thing, like these mixing of this panel design user interface with other types of UI stuff that's a lot more custom. Um, and it works really well for this sort of thing. Like you can hack this stuff together really quickly. Um, all right. Performance by default. Okay, so mixed reality is kind of crazy when it comes to performance. So you've got these things that sit on your head. In particular, like with the HoloLens, which I work with a lot, it's a mobile chipset too, and it's rendering two screens at 60 frames per second or more. And you got to do this with a battery. Like this is kind of like these crazy performance characteristics. And when you're working with a game engine or something like that, uh, that may not be their primary platform, or they may have options to scale all the way through the roof. And it's really easy to set yourself up for failure in a lot of those situations. So I really wanted to make sure that StereoKit by default was very, very fast and was not going to drop frames by accident. Like when you load something up, you do a bunch of things, it's still going to perform okay unless you're really, really trying to hurt yourself. So like I have a collection of shaders that are built in. It does physically based rendering. These are all very much optimized for mobile devices, for being like looking really nice, but at the same time also being extremely fast. And one of the ways that I did this is also kind of by stepping back and saying like, okay, this is still not a game engine, so we're going to simplify a few things here. The lighting is actually pretty simplified in StereoKit. So this is one of the places where it's kind of a sacrifice. But if you're making an application, not a game, this kind of makes a little bit more sense. I don't have a completely amazing lighting system. All I have is a single spherical harmonics, just a piece of math that describes the lighting of your environment. And it's just this one thing. You toss a direction, a normal into it, and it gives you the lighting in that direction. And that's all. That's it. It describes the entire scene. The nice thing about this is that it does look really good. Like you can see here, this is basically baking a couple of different light sources into a single spherical harmonics math representation. And it's pretty customizable. You can change the colors, the intensity, and it does look pretty good. You can also pull in a cube map, and it'll generate this math model based off of that cube map as well. Looks very good from there too. This like I don't have shadows or like point lights or spotlights or global illumination or any of that fancy stuff. But this works for most cases. And you can't mess up performance with this, which is the important part. Like this is blazingly fast. Um, so yeah, that's kind of an interesting element there, but it's I don't consider it to be necessarily a bad thing. It's easy to create a good light with this. So I think those are all the core tenets. So I'll tell you a little bit about getting started. I'm not going to go into details here too much. This is primarily intended to be consumed through C Sharp. I have a NuGet package. I have a couple of templates that are on the Microsoft Visual Studio Marketplace. Um, so those are my recommended routes. If you're going the C++ route or C route, it's a little bit more manual. You might have to go build it yourself. It uses XMake for the build system there. But if you're just trying to build an application and you like C Sharp is a very good way to do it. This is what all the documentation is for as well. There's also a GitHub repository. If you want to take a look at the engine code or some of the demo code or stuff like that, there's a whole pile of stuff on the GitHub. This is MIT licensed, so you can do whatever you want with it. We also have a Discord channel. Very happy to answer questions in there too. If you go to StereoKit.net, there's a little invitation to the Discord channel there too. But yeah, that's the code base for StereoKit core is C flavored C++. So it looks a lot like C. I generally stick to C style functions. I don't think I might have a class, but it's primarily structs and functions and stuff like that. So it's very easy to work with. It's fairly straightforward. It might look a little old to you, but I can work with this, and I don't write bugs, which is wonderful. It's easy for me to follow. I had some bad experiences with dependency injection stuff before writing StereoKit, so I'm really enjoying this really simple procedural stuff. But yeah, sources all on GitHub. I have StereoKit.net is where the documentation lives. There should be a lot of stuff on there. If it's missing something, let me know. I have a pair of demo projects. These are basically like 2 or 3 file applications. One of them is a painting application, and just kind of like finger painting. It has the little palette, save, load, stuff like that. The other one is kind of like this Bing Maps API thing, where it just displays data from Bing, elevation, color, stuff like that. So a couple of samples to get started. There's also a list of demos in the repository, and somewhere I've got some links to that as well. But there's a couple of resources here. And then yeah, so these are the links. You can hit me up on Twitter, and that's that. So I'm gonna take a peek here at the channel and see what you guys are saying. So feel free to ask questions. Voice is fine too. However.
So when will you be adding ray tracing support?
Oh man, I love the ray tracing stuff that I've seen. There's Metro Exodus is beautiful, but I'm still kind of limiting this to mobile devices. Like my target is mobile VR, and so I'm always going to have this as my minimum. If mobile VR is ever capable of doing ray tracing stuff, I will be all over that. But for now, I'm sticking to really really basic stuff, keeping it lean. Like one of the reasons why StereoKit is very very fast is because a lot of the stuff that I'm doing is simplified. Like because I don't have this complicated lighting system, I can really simplify how the renderer works, and like it's just really really fast because of the simplicity. Like it's all instanced by default. I don't have to separate things because of which lighting batches that they fall into or things like that. I can just go, and it's fantastic. How's the animation going? Animation is like one of the few core features that I still haven't gotten to yet. I actually I want to put that in this next update. Like I've kind of been like um, there's so many things that I really want to work on. It's really hard to prioritize them. I really want to do it for this update. I'm not going to promise it though. Like I know at Microsoft we have this Microsoft Mesh stuff coming up, and so one of my big things that I'm working on is making sure the StereoKit will work well with Microsoft Mesh. It doesn't get a direct integration, but it will get something on top of StereoKit that'll work nicely. But one thing that it does have is like avatar support. So I may end up putting in some animation specifically for that. Like if that is something that I need to do, then that'll definitely get the animation stuff prioritized. But it's on my list. Really want it. VRM might be a nice way to do it. I don't know. Yeah, GLTF is a great format. GLTF is kind of like it was one of the very first features that I implemented in StereoKit. Um, and I felt like it was going to be a really good base. I'm very happy with that decision. It kind of has been. Um, I at some point need to do like a complete like go through the entire conformance list and make sure that I hit everything on there. Right now, it's mostly been kind of like, well, everything I've tested works so far, but I probably haven't hit some of the more esoteric parts of GLTF. At some point on my list is also like full conformance for GLTF. It'll get most of them right now, though. A declarative scene graph. Um, so one thing that I have been trying to stick to with StereoKit, I really want to have StereoKit be pretty stateless. So this is like I don't really want to enforce my idea of what an application should look like, what sort of frameworks you should use, or things like that. I really want you to take care of the state and framework stuff. Like this is a very opinionated. It's also starts getting into some of the object-oriented stuff or performance stuff. StereoKit works very well in a stateless fashion. I might at some point I've kind of separated out this idea of StereoKit core and StereoKit framework. StereoKit framework is this little piece of C# that I keep off on the side where I basically say like anything's game. I can add some state here. I can maintain some things separately, and I may add some things like there. I have considered doing a component system, but there's so many ways to do a component system. Like which one's the right way? And yeah, like yeah, it's great because it's stateless. It has a nice feeling to it, and I think like if you've never worked without a scene graph, you might actually be very interested in how you do things with StereoKit because it is actually really nice. Um, I have seen people build scene graphs on top of StereoKit too. I a couple of people have done this, and it's pretty straightforward to do. Like it doesn't take too much work. If you are trying to get some sort of like scene hierarchy thing going with StereoKit, there is a piece called the hierarchy class, which will kind of let you push and pop matrix stuff onto a stack. Um, I may come back and revise some of this design, but this kind of feels a little bit like some of the old OpenGL stuff. Just pushing and popping transforms. How am I doing on time, actually? I hope I'm not stepping on anybody else's.
You're good. I actually had
Okay, yeah.
another question. So I've been using a framework called React Speed Fiber lately for WebGL stuff, which is super cool. And one of the tools they have is specifically for parsing GLTF files. So a lot of times you'll get a GLTF file and it'll have a whole bunch of parts, and maybe you want to interact with like one of those parts. So I'm wondering if there's something similar for that in StereoKit.
Mhm. Um, so I don't have direct access to like the data from GLTF. There are things that I would like to do to kind of um, like extend the ability of the GLTF importer for StereoKit. So like one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is the maquette. I don't know if you've seen maquette. This is kind of a prototyping tool for mixed reality. It's another Microsoft product. But it lets you design these scenes from inside of mixed reality, and it can export a GLTF file. Which the cool thing about that is then you can use that to um, you know, design your scenes, basically treat it like a level editor. And so it would be really nice to be able to pull out extra data from those GLTF files to like get some metadata. Maquette has some other interesting things in there, like text boxes and some user interface and whatever. Like if I could embed that in the GLTF, like that would be really cool too. So I have been thinking about that. I don't have like a direct access to like the like globs of data that are in the GLTF. A USD importer. This is the USD and not USDZ. I know USDZ is the Apple thing, right? And I haven't really looked too much at this. I know GLTF and USDZ are kind of like these competing formats types. Okay, so pretty much the same. Okay. Um, if you want it, if that's a priority, I will totally look into it. and see if that's something easy to do. One of the nice things about the GLTF is that it has really nice library support. There's a library called CGLTF, which is actually what I use for the core of the GLTF importer. So it takes care of all of the parsing and stuff, and I just kind of dig through the parse data. But if there's something like that for USD, I would love to know, and I would totally. Yeah, I try not to use too many external libraries. I definitely do it now and again. I'm like, this is still mostly a solo project. I've been working on it for 2 years, but there's still some things I don't want to tackle. If I had all the time in the world, I'd write my own physics library too. But I've got a dependency for that as well. Yeah, I'll take a peek at USD. Oh, Unreal with GLTF export. That would be sweet. Okay.
Yeah, they just added that in Unreal 5, and I am very excited about it.
I might have to check that out. I kind of been meaning to. I really want to see Nano in action and Lumen.
Definitely.
Oh man, Lumen. If I could stick Lumen
Oh,
as
that would be
StereoKit, make
Yep,
that run on a HoloLens.
I would be happy to show you the way around Unreal. Maybe I'll do that for the next summit. I'll do it around Unreal talk.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So, what's the most complex project that's been developed on StereoKit that you can freely talk about?
You know, I haven't really been digging into too much to what people are building with it. I know some people are using it. I don't know exactly what people are using it for. Um, I know for me, like the open world procedural exploration thing with procedural, like erosion based landscapes is pretty complicated. It's definitely getting there. Um, but I think that most of them have kind of been a little on the less complex side so far. Uh, if you are interested in making something complex with StereoKit, I will bend over backwards to support you. I definitely would like more projects to prove it out. Oh no, I hope that wasn't phrasing.
Oh no, absolutely. I think right now a project I'm looking into is a model importer, and I mean, it looks like you've already built that, so that is absolutely cool. Um, I know it's mixed reality first, of course, but have you seen any 2D applications built with it? Seems like it would be a great cross-platform, just general.
Yeah, I've kind of thought about this a little bit. So I do have a something kind of like Lightroom that I've built based off of DirectX, and I've been porting it over to use StereoKit as the base for it, and it's completely two-dimensional. Like it can load up like whole piles of raw images and display them and rate them and modify them and stuff like that. It's a pretty complete application, and it is a flat screen thing. It's capable of making flat screen applications. There might be a little bit of extra work to make sure that that's like a really good experience, but it's doable. Yeah, I take requests for features too. Like if you ask me, I'll stick it on my list. If you ask me twice, I bump it higher on my list. So
That seems like a very abusable list.
well, I can't promise that I don't have security flaws.
Have
I'm a
you
very hackable person.
have you looked into EXTX overlay?
The overlay thing.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at this yet. This is for like if you wanted to build an application that worked on top of another application.
Yeah.
So I've had some mixed feelings about this. I don't think this is a great route to go for multi-app stuff. Especially when you're considering like a mobile application. Like I know if you bring up the keyboard or the file picker on a mobile device, like because they use this composition stuff and they're rendering two applications and then composing them, the frame rate drops significantly. Like they're just not really good at it. So it hasn't been a priority for me. Um, if you think that's something that's important, I would totally love to look into it. Um, I think it also has somewhat limited support. Do you know which runtime support that?
So LunarG made a layer, and I think he got it up and running on at least SteamVR, maybe on WinMR. Monado supports it natively. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's how we are planning. Like, I'm Jacob from Monado Tech Lead.
Okay.
So yeah. So I mean we're looking to do like applications or our system application and stuff like that, and then we're gonna use overlay to display on top of it.
Okay.
So
If
it
I
would be
added
good.
it, would you use StereoKit?
Maybe.
Okay. Well, there we
Yeah.
go. Points.
Yeah.
I'll look into it.
Also, I think the beta of SteamVR silently added full support for it.
Okay. That might make it a little
Ooh.
easier to test for. I do sometimes like load up Linux and check a few things here and there, but it's not exactly my primary workstation. Cool. All right. Yeah, mostly when Nova finds a bug. I'll dig in then.
Yeah, I think so. I say that, but we also tried using it after they added support, and the extension that was built by LunarG worked, but the Steam XR one did not. So there's some discrepancy there, and it's undocumented. So maybe
Yeah, I would say like it's still a little bit early day on OpenXR stuff, and so there's a few things that are a little fuzzy here and there. I try my hardest to make sure that it works everywhere, but testing on all these different platforms is also kind of tricky. Like, I don't even know how many runtimes there are at this point and how many different flavors, but when I sit down to do a full release, it's like a complete day of testing just to check it on everything, like just to make sure that it just runs. That's all. Yeah. All right. Well, I think I'm good. I'm happy to hand it over for a break or something like that. I probably want to drink water. But thanks for listening to me rant. I hope that this was interesting to you. Yeah.